If you read this, do not try to find me. She's in the shadows, watching with burning eyes, anywhere and everywhere. No matter how far I go or where I am, she's there, watching. I'll try to explain what happened. It started with a walk in the woods. I usually go there to clear my head, but this time was a bit different. Life has been difficult. My father, the only consistent figure in my life, passed away a few months before. My relationship with my girlfriend broke down. I was working as much as I could, but I could never keep up with my debt. Life was becoming a landslide, and I had the intention to end it. What better place than the woods? It was a beautiful day. I went for a walk with a backpack filled with rope and a pre-tied noose. I found a tree off the beaten path I could tie myself to. I expected a dog walker would find me at some point. They always seem to find the bodies. I was securing the noose to a branch when the puppy found me. I didn't recognize the breed. It had shaggy black fur with a faint silver ridge along the spine and beautiful, burning amber eyes. It looked at me and I felt ashamed. It seemed too young to be walking free in the woods, and it must have been lost. I untied the noose and climbed down from the tree. The pup stood waiting, its tail wagging. I knelt beside it and gave it a stroke of the head. It had no collar. He could have been lost or abandoned. "All right, boy, what are you doing out here?" I asked. He wagged his tail and licked my hand. There was some movement amongst the bushes. I called out to see if its owner was nearby, but got no response. The weather began to turn. Heavy gray clouds quickly filled the sky, and thunder rumbled through the trees. The air became thick with the storm energy. "We should get you somewhere safe," I decided, taking the pup back to my car. That was when I started noticing things were strange. The rain began to come down, drumming heavily on the car roof. The once beautiful day became dark. I decided to drive towards a vet I knew locally. If they couldn't take him in, they could surely suggest someone who would. They can check for a chip and maybe find the owners. I put the puppy in the passenger seat of my car. As I drove out of the car park, a flash of lightning showed something amongst the trees. A silhouette of a deer or a large dog, maybe, barely distinguishable from the shadows. I drove on. With the next lightning flash, the creature was closer, just off the side of the road. It could have been a man, or it was something four-legged but facing me. Two embers ignited in what could have been a pair of eyes. I didn't feel like waiting to find out what was watching me. I sped up and pulled out onto the main road. As I drove, the pup fidgeted in excitement, sniffing at the seat and playfully mouthing at my hand as I tried to hold him in place. I went to the vet only to find them closed. I searched my phone for dog rescue homes, but there was nothing nearby. "Looks like you're coming home with me, boy," I told him. I think he looked happy about that. Maybe I was projecting. Lightning flashed again. If I was going to take him home, I thought I'd better stock up on some food. It would require dipping into my overdraft, but at this point I didn't really care about anything but this dog. I stopped at my local shop and left him inside the car. At least I thought I did. While I was at the checkout buying a single tin of dog food and some treats, he appeared yapping at my feet. "You can't bring dogs in here," the miserable sleep-deprived shopkeeper snapped at me. I didn't. Sorry," I stumbled back. I scooped him up under my arm and went back to the car with my shopping. The door was locked. He must have snuck out before I shut the door. I was sure he was still inside when I locked it, though. I saw him through the window. I must have been wrong. I couldn't claim to be in the clearest state of mind, given my original plans for the day. I bundled him back in the car with the shopping. Despite not necessarily being a good boy, I told him that he was, and tore open the bag to invite him to a treat. I started my car, and there was another flash of lightning. It cast a shadow over the road where the thing stood, watching me, eyes burning. It was getting closer, close enough to make me afraid. I floored it, pulling away from the shop and into the road without even looking, my tires spinning to find traction. I checked the rearview mirror as I sped away to see if the shadowy creature was giving chase, but I saw nothing. I looked forward, and with a flash of lightning, it was there in the middle of the road. 2 eyes burning bright as fire hovered in the shadows of an old oak tree. The creature was at one with the darkness, appearing only in the shadow of the flickering lightning. In the brief moment of shadow, I could just make out faint wisps of eerie pale glow weaving through the void. My eyes were unable to make sense of the shapes. I jumped on the brakes, forcing the car behind me to screech to a halt. The puppy tumbled forward and into the footwell with a yelp. "What are you doing?" the driver shouted from behind me. I ignored him and helped the puppy back onto the seat. He wagged in excitement. I looked around for the beast, but there was no sign of it. The lightning had stopped. The rain was lightening now, and the dark clouds were rolling away as quickly as they came, letting the daylight through. The road before me was clear. The driver behind me sounded his horn. He didn't see anything. "You okay, boy?" I asked. He seemed unconcerned about anything that was happening in the world. "We should get home," I said. I drove through the town, wary of every shadow. I felt like I was being watched, but I couldn't see whatever was watching me. Every flicker of light or patch of darkness put me on edge. Car headlights reflected off the wet road and cast images onto my mind. I began to doubt my sanity. I was heading home for shelter and safety, but I'd never felt safe there before. I lived in a room in a drafty old red brick Victorian house riddled with damp. I was overdue on rent to the landlady, Miss Whitaker, who was a harsh old woman hoarding money to take to the grave. She didn't allow noise or visitors, and she certainly didn't allow pets. Encountering her with the puppy in my arms was as terrifying as whatever was stalking me, because at least I knew Miss Whitaker was real. But there I was, the noose still in my backpack. I just needed to help out this dog before I could go back to my original plan. Why should I care about anything else? By the time I got home, the clouds had mostly parted, and we were getting the last of the afternoon sunshine. The daylight put me at some ease. I picked up the pup and its food and rushed into the house, hoping to get to the stairs before Miss Whitaker noticed me. Too slow. She appeared behind me in the gloomy hallway as I was halfway up the stairs. "Shouldn't you be at work?" she asked in a tone that was searching for a problem. "Day off," I replied without turning around, hoping she hadn't spotted the puppy. "Oh, I hope it's payday off. Rent is due," she said with suspicion. "Of course," I said, and continued walking upstairs. "What is that you've got there?" she asked. I turned to face her, resigned to revealing the puppy, but when I turned, the puppy wasn't in my arms. I looked around at the floor and saw no sign of it. Miss Whitaker had a ghostly appearance. Her gray hair and pale face were monochrome in the drab darkness of the hallway. She looked at me impatiently, and eventually I replied, "Nothing. It's just some shopping. Nothing too expensive, I hope. You need to pay my rent," she snapped. Then I saw it again. Behind Miss Whitaker in the shadows lurked the beast. Its flaming eyes drew up behind her. The shadow grew, almost submerging her in a shadowy void. For a moment, I hoped it would pull her in. Miss Whitaker said something, but I wasn't listening to her, concerned only with the specter in the shadows. I turned and rushed to the bottom of the stairs, but Miss Whitaker recoiled from me. I slapped at the light switch and the hallway brightened, the creature disappearing. Then I ran back up to my room. I slammed the door behind me and put the light on, then rushed over to the debris of dirty washing and litter to the window to pull the curtains open, exposing the remaining day to erase any darkness from the bedroom. I put the puppy on the floor and suddenly felt disgusted with myself. The room was filthy. Dirty dishes were stacked on the bedside table. Every surface was caked with dust. I could barely see the carpet for my mess. This wasn't a fit place for a dog to live. I had the immediate urge to tidy up. I cleaned a small space in the corner and emptied half the tin of dog food onto a clean bowl. While the puppy ate, I tidied up. Then I heard stomping up the stairs, Miss Whitaker shouting out, "What is wrong with you? Why have you put the lights on? That is my electricity you're wasting." She then banged on the door. "Have you got the lights on in there too? Open up." "Sorry, I just need some light. I'm tidying." "You? Ha!" This was the closest I had ever come to hearing her laugh. Turn it off now, or you can move out. Please, just leave me alone for a bit." She banged on the door again. "Off, now." When she noticed the light remains on, she said, "Fine, I'll sort it myself," and stomped back downstairs. The puppy was eating happily. I found a half-full bottle of water and emptied it into a small dish for him to drink. I watched him while sitting on the edge of my bed. Then the puppy had his fill and came over to sit by my feet. I lifted him onto the bed, and he got comfortable, resting his head on my thigh as his amber eyes looked up at me. He began to sleep as I stroked the top of his head, and it seemed at that moment we were both content. Then the lights went out. Miss Whitaker must have switched my electricity off at the fuse box. The fading daylight from outside the window was not enough to extinguish the shadows in the corner by the wardrobe. Flaming eyes slowly appeared from nowhere, as if the darkness was a doorway. The monster was in my room. I picked up the puppy and edged away along the bed. Soon my back was against the wall, and I had nowhere else to go. The fiery eyes grew closer. Ethereal wisps danced from the darkness until my eyes could finally make sense of their shape and movement. I could see a vague outline of 4 limbs walking, hackles raised down its back. A muzzle snarled at me, dripping with drool. The great hound became clearer beyond its spectral hue, bigger than any dog I'd ever seen. It had a pale streak down its back like the puppy. It padded beyond the shadow to show thick, shaggy black fur. It was ready to pounce at any minute. It gave a guttural growl, exposing great white fangs. While I recoiled helplessly, the puppy squirmed free and clambered down my leg to the floor, the ridge of pale fur down its back showing white with ethereal light. It ran over to the great black beast, which never broke its gaze away from me. Then, as if breaking from a trance, it looked down at the pup, lowering its snout towards it. "No!" I shouted. I couldn't let it devour the helpless thing. "No!" I shouted again. I picked up the lamp from my bedside table in a pathetic attempt to brandish any sort of weapon. The beast looked at me with contempt, then looked back down at the puppy. It lowered its snout and licked it across its face. The puppy brushed up against the monster and wagged its tail. The great hound inspected the pup with sniffs and licks of maternal care. The mother then picked the puppy up by the scruff of the neck, and they walked into the shadow, fading into wisps of spectral light before disappearing. The puppy appears every so often to play, no matter where I am, home, work, even when I was in the police interview room. The mother is never far away. They usually disappear back into the shadows before anyone else can see them. Usually, those who have seen them don't live long to tell about it. I know they think they're protecting me, but they didn't need to kill Mrs. Whitaker. I didn't notice for a few days until the smell crept through the floorboards. At her door, I heard the buzzing of flies. I called the police to break into her room, and they found her mauled. The coroner ruled that it was a dog attack, although they couldn't explain how a dog got in and out of the locked room. The mother never fully comes out of the shadows, but she watches me. In the corner of my eye, I'll catch its fiery gaze. I don't think she means me harm, but I've seen what she can do, and it's hard not to be afraid. The pup is a good boy, but they're both overprotective. I've seen their eyes appear whenever anyone angers or upsets me. I know she intends to kill them. Death seems like nothing to her. My supervisor at work was found dead in the stockroom after he criticized the time I had taken off due to my mental health. I admit it got to me. He was mauled like Mrs. Whitaker. The hound also appeared after my ex-girlfriend came over and demanded her TV back. She forced her way in, and I was desperate for her to leave, so I ended up giving it to her. But it wasn't about the TV. She was just insistent on arguing. She didn't make it out of the house. I tried to stop them. After the deaths, I had to run. I'm innocent, I swear it, but if the police turn up to arrest me, I can't imagine what the hounds would do to them. I found somewhere secluded to live. I won't say where, but it seems mostly safe, and I'm content with a simple life off the grid. I have had occasional troubles. Some men tried to break into the caravan where I'd been staying. That didn't last long. I had to bury their bodies in a ditch one night. The dogs were just protecting me. At least I'm not suicidal anymore. What does that say about me, that I'm willing to live even when I'm such a risk to others? As long as people leave me alone, they'll be safe. I can't control what comes from the shadows. You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.